What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video, I'll be featuring the team that brought me to Legend in Season 19 of the GOBattleLeague. By the time this video is released, it will have been about 2 weeks since I hit the mark, but I wanted to wait to release it until the Open GreatLeague was back, so this team and how to play it will still be fresh in your mind for GoBattle Week and the remaining 2 weeks of the season. Now this team is a revamped version of last season's Legend team of Shadow Gligar, Annihilape, and Charjabug, but changing out that Bug Electric type for the Water Electric type of Lantern on Water Gun. I made the shift from Charger to Lantern this season because of the rise of Quagsire. Water Gun Lantern has a better matchup against that, Gligar, and Skarmory, while Charjabug has a better matchup against Cresselia and the Dragons. So if you still want to use last season's Legend team, I'll link that video down below in the description, but from what we've been seeing for this season, I believe this variant of the team is better, which is why I'm providing you guys with some examples. And with that, let's get right to the battles. Alright, into the first battle, we lead Shadow Gligar into the mirror. Now what I like to do normally in the mirror is fire off an Aerial Ace, tank an Aerial Ace, and catch the second Aerial Ace onto my Lantern. But as you'll see in this matchup, I land the Aerial Ace and my opponent overfarms the back-to-back aces. So I'm like, surely they throw right away. But props to them, they were extremely patient looking for that catch. So now they're able to land a dig onto my Lantern and bring in their own. And their own's Water Gun as well. So perhaps it's a mirror team. We'll have to see if they have that Annihilape in the back. But a Surf from here won't quite take me out. So they are forced to overfarm, and which allows me to land that Thunderbolt, which is very, very nice in that matchup. But now I am in Surf range, so they can go for the Surf to take me out. And I'm reading that, hey, if it is the Annihilape in the back, or if they're leading a Shadow Gligar, they tend to be weak to counter behind it. My team isn't, but most teams do. That an Energy Lead Annihilape will be very, very useful in this endgame, as they end up coming back in that Gligar. So perhaps they are weak to the Annihilape or just want me to expend shield or energy, but they give a shield to the first Night Slash and they give up a shield to the second Night Slash. So I'm reading, okay, they're extremely weak to this. I need to protect my Annihilape and put it to use against whatever the third Pokemon is. And it ends up not being the mirror team, but a Shadow Magnezone instead. So they are weak to the Annihilape regardless. We do get to land that Night Slash to take it out. We get the boost, a little bit unnecessary, as we do swap out of it into our Gligar for one more wing attack and then the Aerial Ace to take out their Gligar. GG's. Next battle, we lead Shadow Gligar into Shadow Dragonite. Now this is kind of a similar matchup to the Shadow Gligar lead, where I like to shield one and fire off one. But in this specific matchup, they're forced to give up a shield in return because that Aerial Ace will essentially KO them, as they are a Shadow Dragonite. So I will give up my first shield to the Dragon Claw, and I'm going to fire off the second Aerial Ace. They either let this go and I take switch, or if they give up both of their shields, I pivot into the Annihilape right away, shield their first Dragon Claw, and end up getting an energy lead against whatever they have in the back, in which this case ends up being a Cresselia. And that's very fortunate for us. The Annihilape's able to bait out the Cresselia, so the Lantern doesn't have to see it, and we're able to land a Shadow Ball, which does massive damage to the Cresselia. And now, here, depending on what they have in the back, I am in a pretty decent spot. Except I make a massive misplay right here. I come in with my Lantern thinking that, hey, my switch clock will be up in time, and if I'm not able to Water Gun down, I can just catch their move onto the Shadow Gligar. But my switch clock was not up in time, so I'm forced to tank a super effective Grass Knot onto the Lantern. If I knew that it wasn't going to be up in time, I would have just come in with my Shadow Gligar right away. So to force them to expend that energy and then get an energy lead onto my Lantern. But we do not, as this move will take out the Lantern and my opponent will be able to take this one from us. GG's to them, as we concede. Next battle, we lead Shadow Gligar into Lickitung. Lickitung never shielded the first move from the Shadow Gligar in this matchup, so I recommend going for the dig first instead of the Aerial Ace, so you can land the harder hitting move. Dig comes through, does land on the Lickitung, and then I'll tank a Body Slam here. And since it's so close in timing from the Body Slam to Gligar's next move, I like to load up till they're at their body slam and then swap into the Annihilape to catch it. And you will make this catch 9 times out of 10 just because they're basically forced to throw their move right away. Otherwise, you'll reach a dig before them. Now, they end up swapping into a Trevenant, which isn't fantastic, but they end up settling for a C-Bomb, which we can survive. Can't quite reach the Shadow Ball. My opponent was counting correctly. They know it's just Night Slash, so they let it go. But Annihilape did its job again, just like last matchup, and baiting out the Cresselia. It baits out the Trevenant. And they end up having a Spark Lantern behind it. I go for a little bit of a risky Aerial Ace bait here, expecting my opponent to shield, knowing that if they correctly shield the dig, they can then farm down. But since we get the Aerial Ace bait correctly, we could then reach a dig. And I expected my opponent to maybe potentially try and snipe with the Lickitung there, since I was only 1 off from my dig. So that's why I swapped out into my Lantern. And they didn't. They ended up just staying in, which is a little bit surprising. But either way, we're in a pretty good spot as we just watch for the Thunderbolt catch onto their Lickitung, which we do. We go for the Surf, and from here, this game should just about be over. They can land a Thunderbolt, but we're not worried about that, as we'll be able to fire off a Thunderbolt of our own. This Thunderbolt will put their Lantern in Surf range, so we can just go for the Surf to force their final shield, and then once we force their final shield, we can then swap into our Gligar, and one more wing attack gets the dig to then take out their Lantern. So kind of a little bit of a close one there, but we were able to manage our energy well and pull it out. GG's. Next battle, we lead Shadow Gligar into regular Pidgeot, and if it's regular Pidgeot, I'm automatically thinking they're on Feather Dance and Brave Bird. If it's Shadow, I'm automatically thinking Aerial Ace and Brave Bird. But what I'm not thinking is them being on Gust. This is a Gust Pidgeot, and you know, that's kind of a little bit of a better matchup for my Shadow Gligar here because the pacing is a lot better. As I try and call a bait that ends up being a Brave Bird and completely annihilates the Shadow Gligar. But Gust is better for me in that matchup just because Gust is normally used for its fast move pressure, but Shadow Gligar is not necessarily threatened by it. But what's even crazier is they swap into a Bullet Seed Greedent. I'm thinking Gust Pidgeot, Bullet Seed Greedent. They're going for old fast moves. What potential third Pokemon could they have in the back? They come back in Pidgeot, since I know the switch clock is a little bit misaligned here. And I can come in with my Lantern, fire off the Surf right away. I know they want to protect the Pidgeot for the Annihilape. I call the bait, it is just a Feather Dance, and they come in with a Scrafty. This team is quite the blast from the past with a Gust Pidgeot, Bullet Seed Greedent, and a Scrafty. So while it is a very cool team, it does not match up to ours, as we will be able to take this one. As I let this go, I can just save my shield for the Annihilape from here, and we're in a very good spot, especially since shields are down for them. I will give up a shield of my own to respect the foul play. It ends up just being a power-up punch. So we take down the Scrafty, 1 counter, and then the Night Slash. And if this doesn't KO, we will go for another counter and yet another Night Slash, but there's no need to, as the ensuing counter does KO. GG's. Next battle, we lead Shadow Gligar into another Shadow Dragonite. So we know how to play this one out. We're familiar with it. We're going to overfarm a little bit just in case they do look for the catch. And then we go for an Aerial Ace, gets their first shield. They will fire a Dragon Claw off right before we get to our next move to force a shield from us, which we do give up. Go for the second Aerial Ace of our own to force their second shield. And then we pivot into the Annihilape and see how my opponent wants to play it. This one plays it the same way, going for that Dragon Claw, forcing my final shield. And now instead of the Cresselia, they pivot into a Water Gun Lantern here. So we will load up on energy. We try and play to the CMP tie for the Shadow Ball. But my opponent reads that. They continue to overfarm. And they're going to fire off the Surf right before I reach the Night Slash. or the Thunderbolt. Surf might have not been enough to take out the Annihilape, so they wanted to play it safe, go for the Thunderbolt, make sure it's enough to KO. But that's perfectly okay. I can come in with my own Lantern. I get the perfect water gun farm down there. And now I'm in a pretty decent spot as long as I can manage my energy well. I still have the potential to lose this game, but we're going to stick with it and see what Lantern can do. They will land a Body Slam. They come in with their own Dragonite. And here I decide to undercharge it a little bit so I can farm down and leave with more energy from my Lantern, which we do. And here I load up on energy and then I go for the catch because the Vigoroth had enough for the Body Slam right there. And I was reading, okay, if they're counting energy, they would be throwing the Body Slam right there, because if they don't, I would just reach the Surf. But water guns are hard to count, so maybe my opponent lost a little bit of track, or they were reading the catch. Either way, they are forced to throw energy onto that Gligar, and my Lantern does reach the Surf to KO them. As we do get a 4-1 in that set, and now we're looking for a 5-0 for Legend. 4-1 won't do it, a 5-0 will, as we get a fantastic lead of Shadow Gligar into a Jumpluff. They save swap into a regular for Alligator, and that's a little bit tougher for me, because if it's the Shadow, I could just stay in with my Shadow Gligar, take it out, and then stay with it a little bit healthy to deal with the Jumpluff later. But since it's the regular, I am forced to pivot out of there after I land that Aerial Ace. And I bring in my Lantern here because I know that the Jumpluff won't be able to farm down my Lantern. We'll have to throw a move at it, and I still will be able to keep Switch in this matchup. Also, I didn't want to bring in my Annihilape against that Feraligatr, where the Feraligatr is dealing super effective damage with the Shadow Claws. We do land Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt and the water guns add up a bit, put it just about half health. My opponent ends up firing off the energy ball right when they get to 100 energy. So they want to maximize their energy gain right there. And now I know I survive any move from the Jumpluff onto my Gligar. So I wanted to save shields for my Annihilape potentially. And it ends up being a Shadow Empoleon in the back. So I can force that shield with the Dig. Now I can give up a shield of my own to this Empoleon. And here you could argue, should have thrown the Night Slash, but I thought I could counter down in time. And then I didn't want to get caught in between because Annihilape loses CMP to Empoleon. So I end up committing, having to double shield. And now it seemed like a pretty decent spot. It's a tough one because I have to bait with the Night Slash. Fortunately, we do get the bait called correct. My opponent shields the Night Slash. We get the boost. Boost is irrelevant. Shadow Ball would have KO'd from there anyways. As down goes Jumpluff, and that is one win on the board. GG's. Next battle, Shadow Gligar into Altaria. We play out the zero shield scenario in this matchup. Regardless as to whether the Altaria goes for the Sky Attack or the Moonblast, Shadow Gligar should be able to hang on and reach 2 Aerial Aces. So first Aerial Ace does land, they will fire off a move, see which one is it. It ends up being the Sky Attack, so we can let that go, and we end up firing off our next Aerial Ace right away. And now we want to pivot into our Annihilape. It's very crucial you pivot into your Annihilape instantly, because if your opponent stays in that matchup, you will be able to get the perfect counter farm down where they don't reach a second Sky Attack, and now you're up all this energy. My opponent realizes that, so they pivot into a Feraligatr. This is somewhat of an uncomfortable matchup, as it is kind of bait dependent, but fortunately, we just plan on going straight for those Night Slashes, but fortunately, we do end up getting the boost on the first Night Slash. So now, they end up having to double shield the Night Slashes, which they would have done anyways, but the key difference is the amount of counter damage we got in that matchup. Because with that additional counter damage, we can bring in our Lantern, and we have to tank a move from the Feraligatr anyways, but we end up taking less Shadow Claw damage from them, which is very, very nice, considering they have a Shadow Donphan behind it. So this thing runs counter and Body Slam and Earthquake, or Body Slam and Play Rough. I would expect them to be on Body Slam and Earthquake, but very nice spice from my opponent, but unfortunately for them, Lantern destroys that Shadow Donphan, as down goes the Donphan, and the rest of their team, my Lantern would have been able to deal with, so they concede. GG's. Next battle, Shadow Gligar into Annihilape. Fantastic lead. They swap into a Mantine. We have the perfect answer for it in the Lantern. Even though we're not on Spark, this is still an amazing matchup for the Lantern, as no matter what moveset the Mantine's running, Aerial Ace, Bubble Beam, Water Pulse, Ice Beam, all of it is resisted by the Lantern. So we can then fire off these Thunderbolts in return. We do end up getting their first shield, which is amazing for us because we don't plan on giving up a shield in this matchup at all. Since we have our own Annihilape behind the Shadow Gligar, whether we're able to keep switch advantage and put our Shadow Gligar on the Annihilape, or we're able to lose switch advantage, that's fine as long as we have a shield advantage. Because that shield advantage would then allow my Annihilape to easily take care of their Annihilape. But they end up hard swapping out, trying to make a catch of my next move onto their A slash. So we're able to read that. We bring in our Annihilape, and this ends up kind of just being a hard counter game. My opponent did the best they could to kind of dance around and catch moves or juggle energy to try and wiggle their way out of it, but we did not allow them that leniency, as we're able to take this one. GG's. And that is 3 games down. Next battle, Shadow Gligar into another Annihilape lead. Brilliant for us. See what they want to do, and it's a Shadow GOBattleLeague safe swap, so we're going to play it out with the same mentality as last time. We don't need switch advantage here, we just need shield advantage. So I'm going to load up on energy. I fire off the Thunderbolt here to guarantee that shield. They're most likely going to shield it, but just in case they let it go and called the Surf, they would be able to land a Shadow Ball and then force switch advantage or shield advantage from me. And I don't want that to happen based off how I'm playing it. So I wanted to guarantee that shield advantage from them. And here I end up giving up 1 shield, knowing that I can either maintain switch or get shields down from them. And getting shields down from them in this matchup puts Annihilape in a very good sweeping potential. They end up surviving on 1 HP to get the full farm down, which kind of sucks, but it is perfectly fine as I can come in with my Gligar there to tank this energy. We do get denied that wing attack. Again, a little unfortunate as it gives them an extra wing attack of damage, but it's okay as they end up having a Dugong in the back, and this match is over at this point. They will be able to debuff me with an Icy Wind, so now their Annihilape will be able to live a Shadow Ball, but I'm not worried about that because we can land the Shadow Ball, shield up the move that their Annihilape throws, and then we could just counter them down and leave with another Shadow Ball for the Dugong. As we do get the counter down, and at that point my opponent realizes it's over, so they concede, and now we're looking for the 5-0 for the Legend set, and we lead into a Mantine. Very tough lead, but it's not as bad as it seems, because if you call an Aerial Ace bait, you're in a very good spot, or if you shield their Water Pulse or Ice Beam, you're also in a pretty good spot. Since the wing attacks plus the Aerial Aces do tend to KO a Mantine, there's the chance a Mantine could have a bulk point against Shadow Gligar, where one with very high defense ends up surviving both of these Aerial Aces, which it seems like my opponent does, but that's very few and far between. So a lot of those situations in the Zero Shield, if you call the Aerial Ace like I did, you will be able to get switch advantage. But in this specific instance, since my opponent does have that bulk point, I'm not able to get switch advantage, but I am basically effectively able to neutralize that Mantine with my Shadow Gligar, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. I bring in my Lantern to get an energy lead. They don't want that to happen, so they pivot into Shadow Poliwrath, and I have a fantastic answer in my Annihilape. I go for the Night Slash here, knowing that this will KO, but also if they shield, I can go for another Night Slash to take it out before they reach their next move to force my final shield. So that's why I go for it 1 counter earlier. And now they come in with a Gligar, and seeing that they have a Gligar, we have hit Legend. Because I can just go for the straight Night Slashes in this matchup. If they call it, it does not matter, but they end up shielding. So now I can go for the Shadow Ball, which is guaranteed to land, or if it gets their final shield, I have the super effective Surf for my Lantern, And either way, no matter how my opponent played it in that situation, the water guns plus the surf, the pure water gun damage, doesn't matter. We are able to take this one, as down goes the Mantine and down goes the Gligar. So that does secure a 5-0 in the set, as you'll see here, bringing us up from 29-28 all the way to 3004 and securing legend. As you'll see, we get the screenshot and the pose. Now, like as we like to do here on the channel, we go to check out the Lana pose, which is all right at best, as well as the Pikachu Libre. Unfortunately not shiny. Maybe one day I will get the shiny Libre, but that day is not today, as we are able to catch it, check out its IVs, and appropriately name it Season 19 Legend. So yeah, had a nice little 9-1 run to hit Legend this season. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, if you're interested in the Charjabug version of this team, I'll link that video in the description box below so you guys can check it out. Otherwise, this is most definitely another solid open Great League team for you all to try. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.